The gunshot cracked through the clear Montana sky like the sound of destiny itself, sending a flock of startled birds fluttering upward from the cottonwood trees along Clearwater Creek. Madeline Vance froze, her hands clutching the parcel of documents she just collected from the stagecoach papers that supposedly confirmed her rightful ownership of the Double V Ranch. Papers that someone clearly didn't want her to have. It was 1878, 6 years after her father's death had left her, at 22, the sole heir to his sprawling cattle ranch outside of Whitehorn, Montana. Madeline had spent those years back east finishing her education, as her father had wished. She'd only returned west 3 months ago to claim her inheritance, only to find that time and distance had complicated matters beyond imagination. "Miss Vance." The stagecoach driver called out in warning, but Madeline was already moving, hiking up her skirts and dashing toward the nearest building, the Mercantile, as another shot splintered the hitching post beside her. "Get down," a deep voice commanded, and Madeline found herself yanked roughly behind a water trough as a third shot whistled through the air where she'd stood just moments before. Her rescuer was a tall man with dust-caked clothes and a weathered face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His eyes, startlingly green against his sun-darkened skin, assessed her quickly. "Are you hit?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "No," Madeline managed, clutching the document pouch tighter to her chest. "But someone clearly wants me to be." "Quinn Nathans," he introduced himself briefly, drawing his pistol and peering cautiously around the edge of the trough. "You'd be Samuel Vance's daughter, Madeline Vance," she confirmed, surprised. "You knew my father." A grim smile touched his lips. Everyone knew Sam Vance. Best cattleman in the territory. His expression hardened as he scanned the buildings across the street. "And everyone knows what Harlan Blackwater's been trying to do to his land since he passed." "Blackwater," she repeated, the name sending a cold shiver down her spine despite the summer heat. Harlan Blackwater owned the neighboring ranch and had been pressuring her through his lawyers to sell the Double V since she'd arrived. When she'd refused, things had gotten progressively more hostile. Quinn's attention returned to the leather pouch in her hands. "Those the land title documents your father's lawyer sent for?" Madeline nodded, wondering how this stranger knew so much about her business. "Yes. Mr. Fulton said these would settle any questions about ownership once and for all." "Then I reckon that's why someone's shooting at you," Quinn said matter-of-factly. "Blackwater's been claiming your father sold him water rights to Clearwater Creek before he died. Without proper documentation, it's your word against his, and he's made a lot of friends in this town with his money." Another shot rang out, this one hitting the dirt several yards away. The shooter was getting desperate, his aim less precise. "Sheriff!" Someone yelled from down the street, and the shooting abruptly ceased. Quinn touched the brim of his hat. "I'd suggest you stay low until we're sure our friend has moved on. Mind if I escort you back to your ranch once the sheriff sorts this out?" Madeline studied him, taking in the trail dust that spoke of long riding, the calloused hands that marked him as a working man, and the steady gaze that didn't waver from her face even amid danger. "Why would you help me, Mr. Nathans? You don't know me." "I knew your father," he said simply. "And I know Blackwater. That's enough for me." The sheriff's investigation yielded little. No shooter was found, though Quinn pointed out the likely hiding spot in the livery loft, where cigarette butts and scuff marks in the hay suggested someone had been waiting. Sheriff Tate promised to look into it, but seemed skeptical that anyone would take shots at a lady in broad daylight. Madeline noted the way his eyes slid toward the saloon where Harlan Blackwater was known to spend his evenings buying rounds for the locals, including, she suspected, the sheriff himself. Quinn insisted on accompanying her back to the Double V, riding beside her wagon with one hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. They traveled in companionable silence for several miles before Madeline's curiosity got the better of her. "How did you know my father, Mr. Nathans?" "You seem young to have been his contemporary." Quinn's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "I worked for him last 3 seasons before he passed. Started as a ranch hand, worked my way up to foreman." Madeline frowned. "But I don't recall seeing your name on the ledgers when I reviewed the accounts." "You wouldn't have," he said, his tone neutral. "I left shortly after your father died. Your father's brother-in-law, Walter Simmons, took over as executor and made it clear I wasn't welcome. Said he had his own men to bring in." The mention of her Uncle Walter made Madeline's hands tighten on the reins. Walter had managed the ranch in her absence, sending her increasingly dire reports about drought, cattle disease, and poor market prices, all reasons, he claimed, that she should sell to Blackwater. "And where have you been since then?" she asked. "Wyoming, mostly. Some time in Colorado." "Cattle work where I could find it," he shrugged. "Heard you'd come back to claim what's yours, so I thought I'd ride through, see if the rumors were true." "Rumors?" That Samuel Vance's daughter was as stubborn as he was. There was definite amusement in his voice now. "Folks said you turned down Blackwater's offer flat, even when he doubled it." "The Double V isn't for sale," Madeline said firmly. "Not at any price." They crested a hill, and the ranch spread out below them, the sprawling main house. The bunkhouse, corrals, and outbuildings nestled in a green valley with Clearwater Creek running through it. Beyond the immediate ranch, rolling grassland stretched for miles, dotted with cattle. "It's beautiful," Quinn said softly, and Madeline heard in those 3 words the same love for the land that she felt that her father had instilled in her during her childhood here. "Yes," she agreed, "and it's mine." What Madeline didn't say was how precarious her claim had become. Uncle Walter's mismanagement had left the ranch finances in disarray. The bank was threatening to call in loans her father had taken out, loans she hadn't even known existed until she returned. And then there was Blackwater's claim to the water rights, the lifeblood of any ranch in this country. She patted the document pouch. These papers should finally settle the water rights issue, at least. "Mr. Fulton says they prove my father never sold any part of Clearwater Creek to Blackwater or anyone else." Quinn nodded, but his expression had grown troubled. "Miss Vance, someone just took shots at you over those papers. I don't think Blackwater's going to just accept them and walk away." "Perhaps not," Madeline conceded, "but the law is on my side now." "The law," Quinn repeated with a wry smile. "Out here, the law is only as strong as the people willing to enforce it." They were approaching the ranch gate now, where the Double V brand hung from an arched wooden sign. A rider approached from the direction of the house, and Madeline recognized her ranch foreman, Frank Cooper. "Miss Vance." Frank called, spurring his horse forward. He eyed Quinn suspiciously. "Everything all right." "Just fine, Mr. Cooper," Madeline assured him. "This is Quinn Nathans. He worked for my father years ago." Recognition flickered across Frank's weathered face, followed by something that looked almost like wariness. "Nathans," he said with a curt nod. "Thought you'd moved on." "Just passing through," Quinn replied easily, though Madeline noticed his posture had subtly shifted, becoming more alert. "Happened to be in town when Miss Vance had some trouble." Frank's eyes narrowed. "What kind of trouble?" "Someone took shots at me after I collected these land documents," Madeline explained, holding up the pouch. "Mr. Nathans was kind enough to intervene and escort me home." Frank removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow with his sleeve. "Glad you're safe, madam, though I wish you'd let me ride into town with you like I offered." "I managed," Madeline said firmly, And now we have the proof we need about the water rights. That's good news, Frank said, though he didn't sound particularly enthusiastic. Your uncle's waiting for you at the house. Said he has urgent business to discuss. Madeline suppressed a sigh. Uncle Walter's urgent business invariably involved another reason why she should sell the ranch. Thank you, Frank. I'll see to him directly. She turned to Quinn. Mr. Nathans, would you care to join us for supper? It's the least I can offer in thanks for your assistance today. I'd be obliged, Quinn said, tipping his hat. Frank frowned. Miss Vance, I'm not sure that's Mr. Cooper, Madeline interrupted gently but firmly. Please see to it that Mr. Nathans's horse is looked after. And let Mrs. Delahunt know we'll have an extra place at the table tonight. As they approached the main house, Madeline became aware of Quinn studying the ranch with a critical eye. Cattle count looks low, he observed. It is, she admitted. Uncle Walter claims we lost a significant number to disease and rustlers while I was away. And the south pasture fence is down, Quinn continued. That's prime grazing land going to waste. We're short-handed, Madeline explained. Several men left when I took over from Uncle Walter. Quinn made a noncommittal sound, but his expression suggested he had thoughts on the matter that he wasn't sharing. Uncle Walter was waiting on the porch, his portly frame rocking anxiously in a chair that creaked beneath his weight. He stood as they approached, his eyes widening at the sight of Quinn. Madeline, my dear, he said, ignoring Quinn completely. Thank heavens you're back safely. I was growing concerned. I had an eventful trip, Madeline replied, dismounting from the wagon with Quinn's assistance. Someone tried to shoot me in town after I collected the water rights documents. Walter's face paled, though whether from shock at the attempt on her life or the mention of the documents, Madeline couldn't tell. How distressing, he managed. His eyes darted to Quinn, acknowledgment finally flickering across his features. Nathans, didn't expect to see you back in these parts. Mr. Simmons, Quinn replied evenly. Been a while. Not long enough, Walter muttered, then forced a smile for Madeline. My dear, I really must speak with you privately. Blackwater's man came by earlier with a new offer, quite generous, I must say. No, Madeline said simply. And I'd appreciate if you would stop encouraging him, Uncle Walter. The Double V is not for sale now or ever. Walter's face reddened. You're being stubborn and foolish, just like your father. This ranch is bleeding money. The bank will be satisfied once I show them these, Madeline interrupted, patting the document pouch. With clear title to the water rights, we can rebuild the herd properly. May I? Quinn asked, gesturing to the pouch. Madeline hesitated only briefly before handing it over. Quinn carefully extracted the papers, unfolding them on the porch railing. His brow furrowed as he studied them. Miss Vance, he said slowly, when did your father supposedly sign this water rights sale? He didn't, Madeline replied. That's the whole point of these documents. They prove, according to this, Quinn interrupted, turning one document toward her and pointing. Samuel Vance sold the water rights to Harlan Blackwater on April 17, 1872. There's his signature. Madeline stared at the signature in disbelief. It certainly looked like her father's distinctive scrawl. That's impossible. Father would never have sold the water rights. The entire ranch depends on that creek. Well, according to this legal paper, witnessed and notarized, he did, Quinn said grimly. He looked up, his eyes locking with Walter Simmons. Interesting that it's dated just 2 weeks before he died. Walter fidgeted. Well, Samuel was making all sorts of arrangements near the end. Getting his affairs in order. By selling the one thing that made this ranch viable, Quinn asked skeptically. Samuel Vance knew ranching better than any man I've met. He wouldn't make that mistake. It's a forgery, Madeline declared, her shock giving way to anger. "It has to be." "Mr. Fulton assured me these documents would prove my claim, not undermine it." "Fulton's been Blackwater's lawyer for years," Quinn pointed out. "Who exactly sent you to him?" Madeline turned slowly to look at her uncle, whose face had gone from red to ashen. "Uncle Walter suggested him," she said quietly. "Said he was the most knowledgeable about land matters in the territory." Walter began backing toward the door. "Now, Madeline, I only had your best interests at heart. The ranch is failing. I was trying to help you secure the best price from Blackwater before the bank forecloses." Quinn moved with surprising speed for such a tall man, placing himself between Walter and the door. "Interesting definition of help, Simmons." "You have no right to interfere," Walter blustered. "This is family business." "It's fraud," Quinn corrected. "And possibly murder if what I've long suspected about Samuel Vance's death turns out to be true." Walter's face drained of what little color remained. "Murder, that's absurd. Samuel died of a heart condition. Everyone knows that." "A previously undiagnosed heart condition that struck quite conveniently after he supposedly signed away his water rights," Quinn noted. His hand rested casually near his pistol. "Mighty interesting timing." Madeline felt as if the ground beneath her feet had turned to quicksand. "Uncle Walter, what have you done?" Walter Simmons broke. His shoulders sagged and he collapsed back into the porch chair. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he whimpered. I needed money. Your father wouldn't lend me any more after my mining investments failed. Blackwater approached me after Samuel refused to sell him the water rights. Said he'd pay me handsomely if I could convince Samuel to change his mind." "So you forged his signature after he died," Madeline concluded, her voice hard with contempt. "No," Walter protested. "I didn't forge anything. That was Blackwater's doing after Samuel refused to cooperate, even when—" He stopped abruptly. "Even when what, Simmons?" Quinn pressed, his voice dangerously soft. Walter looked away. "Even when we tried to pressure him. We just wanted to scare him a little. Blackwater's men roughed him up one night. He wasn't supposed to." "Die," Quinn supplied, his face like stone. Madeline felt ill. "You helped Blackwater kill my father." "It was an accident," Walter insisted. "His heart gave out during the altercation. Blackwater said we could make it look natural. No one would question it, and then we just needed the documents to make it all legal." "Legal?" Madeline echoed in disbelief. "You call murder and forgery legal?" "I was trying to protect you," Walter cried. "If you knew the truth, you might have done something foolish. Blackwater is a dangerous man with dangerous friends. I thought it best to stay on his good side, work with him." "By helping him steal my ranch," Madeline said coldly. Walter had no answer for that. Quinn's voice cut through the tense silence. "Miss Vance, I think your uncle should be locked up somewhere secure until the sheriff can be summoned. Do you have a root cellar or storehouse that can be secured?" Walter's head snapped up. "You can't do that. I'm her uncle." "You're a self-confessed conspirator to fraud and quite possibly murder," Quinn corrected. "Miss Vance," Madeline straightened her shoulders. "The smokehouse has a sturdy door and padlock," she said decisively. "Frank." She called to the foreman, who had been hovering near the corner of the house, clearly listening. "Please escort my uncle to the smokehouse and see that he's secured there. Post someone to guard it." Frank nodded, his expression grim as he took Walter's arm. The older man went without further protest, his spirit seemingly broken by his confession. Once they were alone on the porch, Madeline turned to Quinn. "What now? These documents don't help me at all." Quinn studied the papers again. "Actually, they might. This forgery is good but not perfect. Your father's signature slants more to the right in the documents I remember him signing, and the date." He tapped the paper thoughtfully. "April 17, 1872 was a Wednesday. Your father never conducted business on Wednesdays. It was his one firm rule. He always rode the property boundaries on Wednesdays, no matter what. You remember that after 6 years? Madeline asked, surprised. A shadow passed across Quinn's face. I remember everything about your father. He was a good man, the best I ever worked for. He carefully refolded the papers. Miss Vance, the real documents that prove your ownership must still exist somewhere. Your father was methodical about his record keeping. Madeline thought for a moment. Father kept his most important papers in his study. I've been through most of them since I returned, but perhaps I missed something. They moved inside to Samuel Vance's study, a wood-paneled room that still held the lingering scent of pipe tobacco. Madeline had preserved it exactly as her father had left it, unable to bring herself to change anything in this sanctuary of his. Quinn moved immediately to the large oak desk, his fingers running along its edge. Samuel had a hidden compartment in this desk. He showed it to me once when he needed help moving some gold coins he kept for emergencies. His fingers found what they sought, a nearly invisible seam in the wood. With practiced pressure, a small panel popped open in what had appeared to be a solid desk front. The compartment was empty. "Someone's been here before us," Quinn said grimly. Madeline's heart sank. "Uncle Walter must have found it years ago." "Maybe," Quinn agreed. "Or maybe your father moved his important papers somewhere else when he suspected trouble was brewing." But where? Madeline wondered aloud, gazing around the study. Quinn's eyes swept the room, taking in the bookshelves, the hunting trophies, the large painting of the ranch that hung behind the desk. He moved to the painting, studying it intently. "Your father commissioned this painting the summer before he died," he said, reaching up to lift it from the wall. He was particular about every detail. Behind the painting was a small wall safe, its dial gleaming dully in the lamplight. "You know the combination?" Quinn asked. Madeline approached the safe, her heart racing. "I might. Father used important dates for his combinations." She tried several: her birthday, her mother's birthday, the date he acquired the ranch, all without success. Finally, she tried the date of her mother's death, and the safe clicked open. Inside was a single envelope, sealed with wax impressed with her father's signet ring. Across the front, in his familiar handwriting, was written, "For my daughter, Madeline." With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and extracted several documents. On top was a letter, addressed to her. "My dearest Madeline," she read aloud, her voice catching. "If you are reading this, then my suspicions were well-founded, and I am likely no longer with you. Harlan Blackwater has been pressuring me to sell the water rights to Clearwater Creek. When I refused, threats were made. Your Uncle Walter, I fear, has become entangled in Blackwater's schemes due to his gambling debts. I have enclosed the original deed to the Double V, which explicitly includes all water rights to Clearwater Creek and its tributaries. I have also included my will, properly witnessed and filed with the territorial court in Helena, naming you as my sole heir and explicitly forbidding any sale of water rights separate from the ranch itself. Trust Quinn Nathans. He knows this land and its people, and his loyalty is beyond question. I have instructed him to watch over the ranch, and you should anything happen to me. All my love, Father." Madeline looked up from the letter to find Quinn watching her, his expression unreadable. "You knew," she said softly. "You knew my father left these documents." Quinn nodded slowly. "He told me about the safe the day before he died. Said if anything happened to him, I should make sure you got what was inside. But after he died, Walter fired me before I could get to it. He had men escort me off the property at gunpoint. So you came back now because I heard you'd returned and Walter was still trying to sell to Blackwater. I figured you might need those papers." Quinn's mouth curved in a slight smile. "And I made a promise to your father." Madeline examined the other documents, the original deed with its clear statement of water rights, her father's will with its explicit protection against selling those rights, and another document that caught her by surprise. "This is a statement," she said, skimming it quickly. "From my father, dated the day before he died, stating that Harlan Blackwater and Uncle Walter had threatened him, and that if he died under suspicious circumstances, they should be investigated." She looked up at Quinn. "This is evidence." "Evidence that might convince even a sheriff in Blackwater's pocket," Quinn agreed. "Your father was a careful man. He knew something might happen." Madeline carefully returned the documents to the envelope. "We need to get these to the county judge in Helena. Sheriff Tate can't be trusted." "That's a 3-day ride," Quinn pointed out, "and Blackwater will realize something's wrong when Walter doesn't report back to him." "Then we'd better leave tonight," Madeline decided. "I can be ready in an hour." Quinn shook his head. "Not me. I'll take the documents to Helena." "You need to stay here and protect the ranch. Once Walter and Blackwater realize the documents are missing, they might try something desperate." "This is my fight," Madeline insisted. "And these are your people who need leadership," Quinn countered, gesturing toward the window where ranch hands could be seen going about their evening chores. "Your father would want you to stay and hold the line. I'll be back with the law as quickly as I can." Madeline wanted to argue further, but she recognized the wisdom in his words. "Very well. But I'm sending 2 of my most trusted hands with you. Safety in numbers." Quinn agreed to this compromise, and preparations were made quickly. Madeline selected the best horses from the stable for Quinn and his escorts, while Mrs. Delahunt, the housekeeper, packed provisions for the journey. As Quinn prepared to depart, Madeline handed him the envelope of documents, now secured inside his jacket. "Be careful," she said softly. "These papers are my only proof." "I'll guard them with my life," he promised, his green eyes serious in the gathering dusk. "And I'll be back as soon as humanly possible. Keep your men close and stay vigilant." "I will," she assured him. "Quinn, thank you for keeping your promise to my father." He touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement, then swung into the saddle. With a final nod to Madeline, he and his 2 escorts rode out, taking the north trail that would eventually lead to Helena. Madeline watched until they disappeared into the darkness, then turned back to the house, steeling herself for the days ahead. She didn't have to wait long for trouble to find her. The very next morning, Harlan Blackwater himself rode onto the Double V, accompanied by 6 hard-looking men. Madeline stood on the porch, shotgun in hand, as they approached. Frank Cooper and the remaining ranch hands formed a protective line in front of the house, their own weapons at the ready. Blackwater was a large man with a carefully groomed beard and expensive clothes that couldn't quite disguise his ruthless nature. He reined in his horse and surveyed the defensive line with amusement. "Miss Vance," he called, tipping his hat with mock politeness. "I seem to be missing an associate of mine. Walter Simmons was supposed to meet me in town last night. I don't suppose you've seen him." "My uncle is indisposed," Madeline replied coldly. "And you're trespassing, Mr. Blackwater." Blackwater's smile never reached his eyes. "Actually, I don't believe I am. According to legal documents, I own the water rights to Clearwater Creek, which runs right through this property. I'm simply checking on my investment." "Those documents are forgeries," Madeline stated flatly, "as I believe you well know." A flicker of unease crossed Blackwater's face before his confident mask returned. "Serious accusation, Miss Vance. One that would require proof." "Proof that's on its way to the territorial judge in Helena as we speak," Madeline informed him, taking satisfaction in the way Blackwater's smug expression faltered. along with my father's sworn statement naming you as his probable murderer should he die under suspicious circumstances. The color drained from Blackwater's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Madeline raised an eyebrow. My father was a careful man, Mr. Blackwater, more careful than you gave him credit for. Blackwater's composure cracked. Where's Simmons? He demanded. What has he told you? Enough, Madeline said simply. Now, I suggest you leave my property immediately, or my men will escort you off and they won't be gentle about it. Blackwater's eyes narrowed as he assessed the determined faces of the ranch hands. He clearly hadn't expected such resistance. This isn't over, Miss Vance, he warned, gathering his reins. No judge in the territory will take the word of a woman over mine. I have friends in high places. And I have the truth, Madeline countered. We'll see which carries more weight. With a gesture to his men, Blackwater wheeled his horse around. As they rode away, he called back over his shoulder. I'd watch the skies if I were you, Miss Vance. Terrible shame how often lightning strikes ranch houses during summer storms. The threat hung in the air long after Blackwater and his men had disappeared from view. Frank approached Madeline, his weathered face creased with concern. He'll be back, Miss Vance, and with more men next time. I know, Madeline agreed grimly. We need to prepare. Over the next 2 days, the Double V became a fortress. Cattle were moved to the most distant pastures under guard. The ranch hands fiercely loyal to Samuel Vance's memory, and his daughter took up defensive positions around the property. Madeline herself checked and loaded every firearm in the house. On the evening of the second day, one of the hands spotted riders approaching from the East Blackwater's direction. How many? Madeline asked, joining Frank at the corral fence where he watched through a spyglass. At least 15, he reported grimly. Too many for us to fight off for long. Madeline's mind raced. They needed more time. Quinn wouldn't return with help from Helena for at least another day, possibly 2 if they encountered any delays. We need to slow them down, she decided. The bridge over the creek, if we damaged it, they'd have to find another crossing. That could buy us hours. Frank nodded in agreement and dispatched 2 men to weaken but not destroy the wooden bridge that provided the most direct access to the ranch house from Blackwater's approach. Darkness fell, bringing with it an oppressive stillness. The hands took their positions, waiting. Madeline positioned herself at an upstairs window of the main house, rifle ready, watching the eastern approach. Around midnight, she saw the flicker of torches in the distance. Blackwater's men were approaching cautiously, aware they were expected. Madeline counted at least 12 torches, possibly more. The sabotaged bridge worked as planned. She heard distant shouts of anger and confusion as the lead riders discovered the weakened planks. But her small victory was short-lived. Within an hour, Blackwater's men had found another crossing and were approaching the ranch house from multiple directions. Hold your fire until they are in range, Madeline instructed the men positioned around the house. Make every shot count. The first shots came from Blackwater's men wild, intimidating volleys meant to frighten rather than hit anything. Madeline's hands returned controlled, precise fire, dropping 2 of the attackers and sending the others scrambling for cover. For nearly an hour, the night was filled with gunfire and shouted threats. Then, ominously, the shooting from Blackwater's side ceased. They're up to something, Frank muttered from his position near Madeline. His words proved prophetic. Minutes later, a flaming arrow arced through the darkness, landing on the barn roof. 2 more followed in quick succession. The barn, Madeline cried in alarm. The structure, filled with hay and timber, would burn quickly. Several hands rushed to battle the fire, leaving the house's defense weakened. This was clearly Blackwater's strategy: divide their attention, then attack. As predicted, Gunfire intensified against the house as Blackwater's men pressed their advantage. A bullet shattered the window next to Madeline, sending glass shards flying. She ducked, then resolutely returned to her position, firing at muzzle flashes in the darkness. The night became a blur of smoke, gunfire, and desperate defense. By dawn, the barn was a smoldering ruin. 2 of her hands were wounded, and Blackwater's men had established positions alarmingly close to the house. Madeline, exhausted but determined, was reloading her rifle when Frank appeared at her side, his face grim. "Miss Vance, we're running low on ammunition. We can't hold out much longer." Madeline closed her eyes briefly, weighing their options. She couldn't risk the lives of everyone at the ranch in what was beginning to look like a losing battle. "Perhaps I could negotiate," she said reluctantly. "Buy us time until Quinn returns with help." Frank shook his head. "Blackwater doesn't want negotiation. He wants the ranch and to silence anyone who knows what he did to your father." As if to punctuate Frank's assessment, another volley of gunfire peppered the house. One of the younger ranch hands cried out as a bullet grazed his arm. "We need a miracle," Madeline murmured, returning to the window to assess their attackers' positions. And then, as if summoned by her words, she heard distant gunfire from the north, the direction of Helena. Not the sporadic fire of Blackwater's men, but the coordinated volleys of what sounded like a larger force. "Listen," she exclaimed. "That's coming from the north trail." Frank cocked his head, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Sounds like your cowboy made it to Helena after all." "He's not Madeline began automatically, then stopped herself, a flush warming her cheeks despite the dire circumstances. The new gunfire grew closer, and Blackwater's men began to fall back in confusion, caught between 2 forces. Through her spyglass, Madeline could see riders approaching rapidly from the north, and at their head, unmistakable even at a distance, was Quinn Nathans. But it wasn't just Quinn. Behind him rode at least 20 men, some in the uniforms of federal marshals. They descended on Blackwater's men with overwhelming force. The battle, so desperate moments before, was suddenly, decisively turning in their favor. Blackwater himself, recognizing defeat, attempted to flee but found his path cut off by 2 marshals. Madeline watched with grim satisfaction as he was disarmed and taken into custody. Quinn rode directly to the house, dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. His clothes were dusty from hard riding, his face haggard with exhaustion, but his eyes sought Madeline immediately. "You're hurt," he said, noticing a cut on her cheek from the flying glass. "It's nothing," she assured him, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after the night's ordeal. "You made it, and you brought an army." Quinn's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "The territorial judge was very interested in your father's documents. Turns out he'd been suspicious of Blackwater for years, but never had enough evidence to act against someone so influential. Your father's sworn statement changed that." His expression sobered. "I'm sorry we couldn't get back sooner. We rode day and night." "You're here now," Madeline said simply. "That's what matters." Over the next few hours, order was restored to the Double V. The wounded were tended to. Blackwater and his remaining men were taken into custody, and the marshals took statements from everyone involved. The lead marshal, a gruff older man named Hargrove, confirmed what Quinn had already told Madeline. "Your father's documents are conclusive, Miss Vance. The deed clearly shows your ownership of all water rights. The forged documents Blackwater was using wouldn't stand up in any legitimate court." He looked grim. "And the sworn statement about threats to your father's life, combined with your uncle's confession, is enough to bring murder charges against both Blackwater and Simmons." "What will happen to them?" Madeline asked. They'll stand trial in Helena, Marshal Hargrove replied. With the evidence we have, I'd expect both to hang. Blackwater's influence won't help him this time. The governor himself has taken an interest in the case. By evening, the marshals had departed with their prisoners, promising to return for further testimony when the trials began. The Double V hands set about repairing damage and tending to the wounded livestock. The barn would need to be rebuilt, and several sections of fence required repair, but the ranch, and more importantly, its people had survived. Quinn found Madeline on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. He'd cleaned up since their arrival, his face freshly shaved, his clothes changed for clean ones borrowed from one of the hands. "You should rest," he said, joining her at the railing. "You look exhausted." "So do you," she countered. "You've ridden for days with barely any sleep." He acknowledged this with a nod. "I'll sleep eventually. Wanted to make sure everything was secure first." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the ranch settled into evening routines that felt reassuringly normal after the chaos of recent days. "I've been thinking," Madeline finally said. "This ranch needs a good foreman, someone who knows the land, who my father trusted." She turned to face him directly. "Would you consider staying, Quinn, taking the position?" Quinn looked surprised, then thoughtful. "I wasn't angling for a job, if that's what you're thinking." "I know that," Madeline assured him, "but you clearly care about this place. You risked your life to protect it, to protect me. That means something." He studied her face, his green eyes serious. "And what about Frank Cooper? He seems capable enough." Madeline sighed. "Frank's a good man, but he's getting older. He admitted to me this morning that he's been thinking about retiring. His sister has a place in California, and she's been asking him to join her there." She smiled slightly. "Besides, he says the excitement of the last few days convinced him he's ready for a quieter life." Quinn leaned against the porch post, considering. "It's tempting," he admitted. "I've missed this place more than I realized." His gaze swept over the ranch, then returned to her face. "But there's something else I should tell you before you make me an offer." "What's that?" Madeline asked, curious about his sudden seriousness. "Your father didn't just hire me as his foreman 6 years ago. He was grooming me to take over the ranch eventually." Quinn hesitated, then continued. "He knew I had no family, and he'd come to think of me almost as a son. We had an agreement that I'd buy into the ranch over time, become a partner." Madeline stared at him, processing this unexpected revelation. "He never mentioned that in his letters to me." "It was still new when he died," Quinn explained. "We'd only formalized the arrangement a month before. The papers were with his lawyer in Helena, not Fulton, his previous lawyer, Atkinson. When your uncle took over, he made it clear those plans were void. I tried to contest it, but without your father alive to confirm our agreement." He shrugged. "Your uncle's men made sure I understood it was healthier for me to move on. So when you came back now, it was because of my promise to your father," Quinn said firmly. "Not to stake any claim. The ranch is rightfully yours, Madeline. I just wanted to make sure you got the chance to decide its future for yourself." Madeline was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this new understanding of her father's plans. Finally, she said, "My father was a good judge of character. If he trusted you enough to make you his partner, that says a great deal." She took a deep breath, making a decision. "The offer still stands, Quinn, but perhaps we could discuss more than just a foreman position. This ranch is too big for one person to manage alone. I could use a partner who knows ranching and who my father trusted." Quinn's eyes widened slightly. "Are you sure? You hardly know me." "I know enough," Madeline said simply. "I know you kept faith with my father long after his death. I know you rode for 3 days straight to help a woman you barely remembered, and I know this land matters to you as much as it does to me." She smiled. "Besides, we'll have plenty of time to get to know each other better as we rebuild this place." The last rays of sunset caught in Quinn's hair as he considered her words, turning the brown strands to copper. "It won't be easy," he warned. "The ranch has suffered under your uncle's management. It'll take years to restore it fully." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Madeline assured him. "No," Quinn agreed, his expression softening. "I don't imagine you are, Miss Vance." "Madeline," she corrected. "If we're to be partners, you should use my given name." "Madeline," he repeated, the name sounding different somehow in his deep voice. He extended his hand. "Partners, then." She took his offered hand, noting the strength in his grip and the calluses that spoke of years of honest work. Partners. Over the weeks that followed, the Double V began its slow recovery. Quinn proved to be everything her father had seen in him: knowledgeable, hardworking, and respected by the hands. Under his guidance, fences were mended, cattle rounded up, and plans made for rebuilding the barn with improvements. Madeline found herself watching him often as he worked alongside the men, his sleeves rolled up, his face intent on whatever task was at hand. There was something compelling about his quiet competence, his dry humor, and the occasional smiles that transformed his serious face. For his part, Quinn seemed increasingly comfortable around her. Their business discussions over ranch ledgers often extended into personal conversations as they shared stories of the years between her father's death and her return. Quinn spoke of his time in Wyoming and Colorado, of cattle drives and the changing West. Madeline told him of her education back east, her struggles to be taken seriously in a world that viewed women as decorative rather than capable. "Father always treated me as if I were as capable as any son," she confided one evening as they sat on the porch after supper. "He taught me about ranching from the time I was old enough to sit a horse. Back east, people thought it scandalous that I knew more about cattle breeding than embroidery." Quinn chuckled. "Samuel used to brag about you to anyone who'd listen, said you had the best head for business of anyone in the family." "Did he really?" Madeline asked, pleased and a little surprised. "All the time," Quinn confirmed. "He kept every letter you sent, read them aloud sometimes in the evenings." He looked at her directly, his green eyes warm in the lamplight. "He would be proud of how you've handled everything." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition that their connection went beyond business, beyond even their shared memories of her father. Madeline found herself noticing things she'd been too preoccupied to acknowledge before. The way Quinn's voice deepened when they were alone together, the way his hand sometimes lingered when he helped her down from her horse, the way his eyes followed her when he thought she wasn't looking. Summer turned to autumn, bringing crisp mornings and golden afternoons. The ranch flourished under their joint management. New cattle were purchased to rebuild the herd. The barn rose again, bigger and better than before, and word spread that the Double V was once more a force to be reckoned with in Montana ranching. In October, they received word that Harlan Blackwater and Walter Simmons had been convicted of fraud and conspiracy in Samuel Vance's death. Both received lengthy prison sentences that effectively meant they would never again be free men. "Justice, finally," Madeline said when Quinn brought her the news. They were riding the north boundary, checking fences before winter set in. The day was clear and cold, the distant mountains already capped with snow. "Your father would be at peace now," Quinn agreed. He hesitated, then added, "There's something else I've been meaning to talk to you about, Madeline." Something in his tone made her turn to look at him more closely. "What is it?" Quinn guided his horse to a stop on a small rise that overlooked the ranch. Madeline halted beside him, waiting. These past months working with you have been good. Better than I expected, he began, his eyes on the panoramic view before them. The ranch is thriving again. You've proven yourself to be everything your father believed you could be. We've done well together, Madeline agreed, wondering where this conversation was heading. Quinn turned to face her directly. The thing is, I find myself thinking about more than just the ranch when I look at you. Madeline's heart quickened. Oh. I've tried to keep things professional between us, Quinn continued. You're Samuel Vance's daughter, my partner in this business, but I'm finding it increasingly difficult to remember those facts when we're together. A smile tugged at Madeline's lips. Perhaps you shouldn't try so hard to remember them. Quinn's eyebrows rose slightly at her response. Madeline, what I'm trying to say not very well, apparently is that I care for you, not just as my partner or my friend, but as a woman I've come to admire more than any other I've known. The autumn breeze caught at Madeline's hair as she considered his words. She'd known for some time that her own feelings for Quinn had grown beyond partnership or friendship. But hearing him speak the words aloud made her heart soar. I care for you too, Quinn, she said softly. Very much. Relief and happiness transformed his face. I wasn't sure. I mean, you could have your pick of suitors, men with more to offer than a saddle-worn cowboy with little to his name but his reputation. Madeline laughed. Is that how you see yourself? Because I see a man of integrity and courage. A man who kept faith with his promises, even when it would have been easier to walk away. A man who rode for 3 days to help someone he barely knew, simply because it was right. She moved her horse closer to his. That's worth more than all the fancy suitors in the world. Quinn reached across the space between them, his hand warm against her cheek. I've wanted to do this for months, he murmured, leaning toward her. Their first kiss was gentle, almost tentative. They're on horseback with the ranch spread below them and the vast Montana sky above. When they drew apart, Madeline saw in Quinn's eyes the same joy and wonder she felt in her own heart. I think, she said with a smile, that my father would approve of this development in our partnership. Quinn laughed, the sound free and unguarded in a way she'd never heard before. Samuel Vance was many things, but subtle wasn't one of them. I suspect this is exactly what he had in mind when he started grooming me to be his partner all those years ago. They rode back to the ranch side by side, their horses close enough that their legs occasionally brushed against each other. The future stretched before them not without challenges, but filled with promise. Winter came to Montana with its customary severity, but the Double V was well prepared. The rebuilt barn housed healthy livestock, the storerooms were stocked with provisions, and the ranch house was warm and secure against the howling blizzards. Quinn officially moved from the foreman's quarters to the main house after he and Madeline were married in a small ceremony just before Christmas. The ranch hands celebrated with uncharacteristic enthusiasm, many of them having quietly wagered on when the boss and the foreman would finally acknowledge what everyone else had seen developing between them for months. Spring brought new calves, fresh grass, and news that the final appeal in Blackwater and Simmons' case had been rejected. Their convictions would stand. With that chapter truly closed, Madeline and Quinn focused entirely on the future. They expanded the ranch operations, investing in better breeding stock and improving irrigation systems to make the most of their precious water rights. Word spread throughout the territory of the double Viticus fair dealing and quality cattle. Within 2 years, they had not only restored Samuel Vance's legacy, but expanded upon it. On a warm June evening 5 years after Quinn had first ridden back into Madeline's life, they sat together on the porch, watching their 3-year-old son Samuel chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Beside them, in a cradle, their infant daughter Catherine slept peacefully. "Did you ever imagine this?" Madeline asked, leaning against Quinn's shoulder. "That day when you saw me being shot at in town," Quinn's arm tightened around her waist. "I knew I'd keep my promise to your father," he said thoughtfully. "Make sure you got those documents, protect the ranch." He looked down at her, his eyes warm with love. "But this, a family. You know, I never dared imagine something so perfect." "Not perfect," Madeline corrected with a smile. "The west fence still needs mending. We're short a hand for the summer roundup, and your son has decided that 4 in the morning is the ideal time to practice his roping skills." Quinn laughed. "Perfect in all the ways that matter, then." As twilight deepened into night, their son tired of his chase and climbed onto the porch, settling into Quinn's lap with the complete confidence of a child who knows he is loved. Madeline watched her husband's strong hands that could break a wild horse, mend a fence, or handle a pistol with equal skill, gently stroke their son's hair until the boy's eyes drooped with sleep. The Double V had weathered its storms and emerged stronger. The false documents that had nearly taken her land were long since exposed as forgeries, and the real ones, the ones Quinn had ridden 3 days to ensure reached the proper authorities, were safely stored in the new safe behind her father's painting. But the most precious thing that had come from those dangerous days wasn't the ranch itself, Madeline reflected as she gazed at her family. It was the love that had grown between her and the cowboy, who had kept faith with a promise made to her father, a love that had given them 2 beautiful children and a future bright with promise. As if sensing her thoughts, Quinn looked up and caught her watching him. The smile that spread across his face held all the warmth of the Montana summer and all the steadfastness that had first drawn her to him. "I love you, Madeline Nathans," he said softly. "And I love you, Quinn Nathans," she replied. "Today and all our days." The night settled around the ranch, peaceful and secure. Clearwater Creek murmured its constant song along its protected banks, and somewhere in the distant pastures, cattle grazed contentedly on Double V land that would pass one day to Samuel and Catherine, along with the story of how their father had ridden 3 days to find the documents that saved their mother's inheritance, and in doing so, found something far more precious than land or water rights. He had found his future, his family, and his home,